Alright. I am responding to the claim that the public school system is significantly less beneficial compared to the private school system. His secondary claims are that public schools have lower rates of success than private schools. Public schools focus on school testing more than private schools to the harm of their students. And public school funding only benefits those in mid to high income areas. The first problem I encountered was with the claim itself, which simply stated the public school system and the private school system. It did not specify what level of education he was talking about. From the evidence he provided and from the way he spoke, I assumed he did not include college, so like high school and middle school and grade school. So I just want to clarify in advance that I am refuting his claim from a grade school to high school perspective. On his first point, that public schools have lower rates of success than private schools, he attributed this to the lack of classroom size for students, and that this lack of classroom size leads to less one-on-one time for each student. He also gave a stat that teaching performance is affected when the class size reaches over 30. But I found from the National Center for Education Statistics that the national average size of class is well below 30. For primary schools, it's 26.2 students, middle schools is 25.5 students, and for high schools it's 24.42 students. So, according to his stats, and according to these numbers, the teachers shouldn't have any detrimental effects to their methods of teaching or the time allotted for each one-on-one time with each student. So that kind of undermines his argument that the class size is too big now for teachers to handle. And then also, as a response to the lack of teaching ability, I guess, there are actually more qualified teachers in public schools. This is again from the National Center for Education Statistics. 56% of public school teachers had a master's degree or higher, but only 43% of private school teachers had a master's degree or higher. So that means more public school teachers have more experience than private school teachers. So you would assume that these people with more experience would have better ability to teach. On to the second claim, that public schools focus on school testing more than private schools and to the harm of their students. It is a fact that public schools do take lengthy accountability tests, and that he also argued that standardized tests limit teachers because all material all the teaching is just all geared towards these tests. But his arguments, most of his arguments were only claims, and he never provided any specific evidence showing evidence or stats how these standardized tests are detrimental, directly affect the education of students. If anything, standardized tests are beneficial to the education of students because it creates a set of guidelines for instructors to follow, and it forces students to have at least a basic mastery of school subjects. For example, if they don't pass the test at the end of the year, then they won't get promoted to the next grade or they won't graduate. And he also argued that in public schools, there's a percentage of teachers that cheated on the test to make their schools look better, so they have higher rankings, so they get bonuses. But the actual amount of schools that were caught cheating is very little. From the New York Daily News, from 2006 to 2013, around 100 cases of schools or teachers cheating were brought to court and found guilty. So 100 cases over 7 years, and there's 99,000 public schools in in America. So that means there's about 0.1% of schools were caught cheating in these 7 years. So that number is so small, it's almost negligible, because there's always going to be people breaking the law, going against the system, and so that kind of undermines his argument. And then on his third point, that public school funding only benefits those in mid to high income areas, he had a point that public school funding comes from local tax, but that conflicts with his second claim that public school funding depends on how well students perform on state standardized tests. So he said that public school funding depends on the test scores, but then his next claim said that public school funding comes from local taxes. So that contradiction kind of undermines his argument, I feel. And so with the conclusion, I conclude that with standardized tests are very beneficial to the education of students, and that the evidence that he provided, saying that teachers cannot handle the class sizes, is incorrect, because the actual class sizes are well below the limit of teachers.
All right, structurally everything's good. I do like the explanation about how you're limiting it to elementary, grade school and high school levels. I thought that was pretty reasonable. I thought you had a good argument on the class size issue. Look, if it begins to decline once they have 30 students and the average classes in the United States never reach that particular level, then there's not really a demonstration that there's a decline. I thought you explained that pretty effectively. I thought there was a good analysis of the advocate's reasoning on that point, and that worked effectively. And then your argument about the teachers in the schools, I thought that was also effective. I do think that you need to demonstrate that having the advanced degree has an influence on the ability of the schools to be more effective, or the teachers to be more effective. I think there's a presupposition built in there similar to the presupposition that the advocate has about the amount of time that you spend on the testing. So it's the same kind of criticism that you make down below on that I would make on that particular point. On the second point, concerning the standardized testing, I mean, you grant that there's a lot of time given the standardized test. That's okay. I like the fact that you do point out that there's no harm indicated from that. The advocate doesn't present any information that suggests spending the time on that has a harm on the educational levels. I thought that was a very good press to the advocate's argument that didn't require any evidence. It's the absence of their evidence in this particular case. Your notion that there is a beneficial effect because it sets guidelines, or it gives them whether or not they're meeting benchmarks. I think those are reasonable arguments to make. It would be helpful if you had some evidence to back that up and make it a little bit stronger. I did think that you had a very effective refutation on the cheating issue, and you diminished that substantially, so that was a good way to finish that point off. And then on the last point, I understand the point that you're making about contradiction, because it sounds like they get the money based on the test scores. Well, that's in part. They get their federal funds based on test scores, or they can be denied some grants from that. I think the advocate's correct that most of the funding occurs locally, although I'm not exactly sure that the local financing obviously works the same way that the advocate's talking about, because I think, especially in California, that we have some changes in the way the funding has to work. But neither side seems to have gone very deep into that, and I still don't see any particular impact. I'm not sure that it's measurable. All right, thank you.